This will be our last lesson of investments. So, really, a portfolio, when somebody talks about their portfolio, it is one or more investments held by an individual or an organization. So, earlier we saw the rate of return. Now, the rate of return, as we saw it, was interest divided by your principal. And now let's times 100% to change it into percentage terms. Now that is your rate of interest over the course of your investment. Another way of saying interest, sometimes it may be helpful to say gain or loss or gain instead of interest. Same concept. The annual rate of return is just your rate of return divided by the total number of years that you have invested. So in here, this says that this is not on your formula sheet, but add to the cheat sheet. So we'll be going over that in the next couple of days, building a formula sheet or a help study sheet for this unit. So let's start off with our first example. Example number 1. Mr. Chang is 64 and plans to retire next year. His portfolio includes the following investments: $50,000 in mutual funds, $100,000 in stocks, $20,000 in GICs. Now, does this portfolio include an appropriate level of risk for Mr. Chang at this stage of his life? Please explain your answer. Now, we've talked a little bit about this earlier, how the older that you get or closer to retirement, the less risk you should have in your portfolio. Now, one thing that we know for sure is stocks are very risky. And so is this portfolio appropriate level of risk for Mr. Chang? I'm going to say this portfolio is probably way too risky for him. It's too risky simply because he plans to retire soon. Well, I guess in the next year. If you would want something more conservative, you should really focus on a GIC, which is far less risk. All right, let's go on to B. Mr. Chang's investments had the following returns last year. Mutual funds increased by 12%. So I'm just perhaps going to highlight that in one color. Mutual funds increased by 12%. Well, that was fairly decent. And now, I'm just going to take a different color. His stocks decreased by 4%. And his GICs had an annual interest rate of 3%. So I'm just going to work this all out now. So mutual funds, whereas mutual funds. So if he has $50,000 in mutual funds, how much was the return in dollars? Do you see this little symbol in dollars? It implies in dollars. All we know is that we gained 12%. The stocks decreased by 4%. So I'm going to multiply that by 0.04 to indicate a decrease in stocks. The GICs had an annual interest rate of 3%. So I'm just going to put times 0.03. All of these are answering the questions: how much did I win or lose or gain or loss in that year? Well, let's take out our calculator. 12% of 50,000, 6,000. If I lose 4% of 100,000, means that I lost 4,000. 2,000 times 0.03. Well, here I gained 6,000. So my total return on this was $2,600. Now, at the end of the year, how much is this worth? Well, it was worth $50,000 plus 6, so now it's worth $56,000. This was worth $100,000, but then we take away $4,000. This is now worth $96,000. This was worth $20,000, and I've gained $600, so now it's worth $20,600. If I add up the value of my portfolio, it's going to be $172,600. So the next thing I suppose that we should do is we should answer the question. Calculate the average rate of return for this portfolio. So I'm going to press pause here. I'd like you to figure this out. How much did we gain or lose in our portfolio? Just think about it for a minute. Okay, so really, to get my rate of return for the year, it's my interest divided by my principal times 100. Since this is only 1 year, I don't need to make any additional divisions. So the amount that I have, the amount of interest that I've gained was $2,600. I could find this in this column. The amount of principal that I initially deposited was 1,000 or 100,000 plus 50,000 plus 20,000. So that's 170,000. Let us multiply that by 100. And what I get is I get a return of 1.529%.